The first rays of dawn crept slowly across the ancient city of London as the capital began to stir from its slumber. In the grand royal residence, a different kind of morning routine was already underway. Prince William had been awake since 5:30, his mind running through the countless details that would make this day one of the most significant in recent royal history. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders as he stood by the window, watching the early morning mist rise from the Thames in the distance. Catherine had risen even earlier, her attention focused on ensuring every detail was perfect, not just for the ceremony ahead, but for their 3 children who would be part of this historic moment. She moved quietly through their private quarters, checking and rechecking the carefully selected outfits that had been chosen weeks in advance. Each piece of clothing had been considered not just for its appearance, but for how it would photograph, how comfortable it would be during the long ceremony, and how it would reflect the dignity expected of the royal family. The children were still sleeping when the morning preparations began in earnest. A team of trusted staff members worked silently to ensure everything was ready, from the polished shoes lined up in perfect order to the fresh flowers that would be placed in the official cars. The atmosphere was one of controlled anticipation, where every person involved understood their role in creating a seamless experience for the family and for the millions who would be watching around the world. Prince George was the first of the children to wake, his natural curiosity immediately evident as he asked his mother about the day ahead. At his age, he possessed enough understanding to know this was no ordinary day. Yet the full weight of what it meant for his future was still beyond his young comprehension. Catherine sat with him on the edge of his bed, speaking in gentle tones about the importance of the ceremony and what would be expected of him as they traveled to Westminster Abbey. Princess Charlotte emerged from her room shortly after, her bright smile already in place despite the early hour. She had always been most naturally confident of the 3 children in public settings, seeming to understand instinctively how to carry herself with the grace expected of a young princess. Her parents had noticed this quality in her from a very young age, and they had worked carefully to nurture it without placing too much pressure on such young shoulders. Prince Louis, the youngest of the 3, required more gentle coaxing to fully wake up and prepare for the day ahead. His parents knew that his age made the formal requirements of the day more challenging, but they also understood that his presence alongside his siblings would send an important message about the family unity that had become central to their public image. The breakfast that morning was quieter than usual, with each family member lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. William found himself reflecting on his own childhood experiences at similar events, remembering the mixture of excitement and nervousness that came with being part of such significant occasions. He watched his children eating their carefully prepared meal and felt a deep sense of pride, mixed with protective concern for how they would handle the intense public scrutiny that awaited them. Catherine had spent weeks preparing the children for this day, using age-appropriate explanations to help them understand not just what would happen, but why it was important. She had shown them pictures of Westminster Abbey, explained the significance of the ceremony, and even conducted practice sessions in their private quarters to help them become comfortable with the formal behavior that would be expected of them. Final preparations began in earnest as the morning progressed. Hair was styled with particular attention to how it would look under the lights and cameras that would capture every moment. The children submitted to these preparations with remarkable patience, understanding that this was all part of something much larger than their usual daily routine. William took a few moments, alone in his study, to review the notes he had prepared for the day. The ceremony would require him to speak certain words at specific moments, and he wanted to ensure that his delivery would be both dignified and heartfelt. He had practiced these words many times, but the gravity of speaking them in Westminster Abbey, surrounded by centuries of history, made them feel entirely different. The security briefings had been thorough and repeated several times in the weeks leading up to this day. Every possible scenario had been considered and planned for, from the route they would take to the Abbey to the precise timing of their arrival. The protection officers who would accompany them were individuals who had worked with the family for years and understood not just their security needs, but their personal preferences and the particular requirements of traveling with young children. As the departure time approached, a sense of calm determination settled over the family. The children had been dressed in their carefully selected outfits, each piece chosen to reflect both their individual personalities and their roles as members of the royal family. William and Catherine took a final look at themselves in the mirror, knowing that the images captured today would be studied and remembered for generations to come. The cars that would transport them to Westminster Abbey had been polished to perfection and positioned precisely at the entrance to their residence. The route had been cleared and secured, with thousands of people already lining the streets in hopes of catching a glimpse of the family as they made their way to the ceremony. The anticipation that had been building for weeks was now reaching its peak as the moment of departure drew near. Catherine gathered the children around her for a final quiet moment together as a family before they stepped into the intense public spotlight that awaited them. She reminded them gently about the importance of what they were about to do and expressed her confidence in their ability to represent their family and their country with dignity and grace. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting warm light through the windows of their residence as the final moments of preparation came to an end. Soon they would step outside and begin the journey that would take them to Westminster Abbey and into the pages of history. The weight of tradition and the promise of the future seemed to converge in these quiet moments before they left the privacy of their home and entered the very public arena where their every move would be watched and recorded for posterity. The polished black cars stood waiting in perfect formation outside the royal residence as the final security checks were completed. Each vehicle had been inspected multiple times throughout the morning, from the engines that would carry this precious cargo to the reinforced windows that would protect the family while still allowing the public to catch glimpses of them during their historic journey. The drivers, handpicked for their skill and discretion, sat ready with hands steady on the steering wheels despite the magnitude of the moment they were about to be part of. William emerged first from the residence, his tall frame cutting an impressive figure in his formal attire. The morning light caught the subtle details of his carefully chosen outfit, each element selected to honor both tradition and the solemnity of the occasion ahead. His face showed the composed expression that years of public service had taught him to maintain, yet those who knew him well could detect the underlying emotion in his eyes as he prepared to take his family on this significant journey. Catherine appeared moments later, her graceful movement down the steps drawing the attention of every photographer positioned at respectful distances around the residence. Her outfit had been chosen with meticulous care, balancing elegance with appropriateness for the sacred setting they would soon enter. The soft fabric moved with her as she walked, creating an image of serene confidence that would soon be transmitted around the world through countless camera lenses. Prince George followed his parents with careful steps, his young face showing the concentration that came with understanding the importance of the day. His outfit, a smaller version of formal royal attire, had been tailored specifically for this occasion. The responsibility of being the eldest child was evident in his posture as he moved toward the waiting car, knowing that many eyes would be upon him throughout the journey ahead. Princess Charlotte emerged with the natural poise that had become her trademark at public events. Her dress, chosen to reflect both her youth and her position, caught the morning breeze as she walked beside her brother. The confidence in her stride suggested that she understood the significance of what they were about to do, yet she maintained the sweet innocence that made her such a beloved figure with the public. Prince Louis, the youngest member of the family, required gentle guidance from his mother as they approached the cars. His smaller steps and occasional glances back toward The safety of their residence revealed the natural uncertainty that any child his age would feel in such circumstances. Catherine's reassuring presence beside him provided the comfort he needed to continue forward into this new and somewhat overwhelming experience. The moment when the family entered their designated vehicle marked the true beginning of their journey to Westminster Abbey. The car doors closed with a soft click that seemed to separate them from the familiar world of their private residence and transport them into the very public realm where millions would be watching their every movement. Inside the vehicle, a sense of quiet anticipation settled over them as they prepared for the drive through London. The route to Westminster Abbey had been carefully planned to balance security requirements with the public's desire to see the royal family during this historic moment. Thousands of people had already gathered along the designated streets, many having arrived before dawn to secure the best viewing positions. Their faces showed excitement mixed with reverence as they prepared to witness what would become one of the defining moments of the modern monarchy. As their car began to move through the gates of the residence, the reality of the moment struck each family member in different ways. William found himself thinking about the long line of his ancestors who had made similar journeys to Westminster Abbey for ceremonies that had shaped the course of British history. The weight of that tradition sat alongside his awareness of how this particular day would contribute to the ongoing story of the royal family. Catherine watched through the window as the familiar streets of London passed by, now lined with people who had come to share in this moment with their family. She had made this journey to Westminster Abbey several times before, but never under circumstances quite like these. The faces in the crowd showed a mixture of emotions that reflected the complex relationship between the modern royal family and the British people. The children pressed close to the windows, their natural curiosity overcoming any nervousness they might have felt about the ceremony ahead. Prince George pointed out landmarks he recognized, while Princess Charlotte waved tentatively at the crowds who waved back with obvious delight. Prince Louis seemed most interested in the police motorcycles that formed part of their escort, his young mind fascinated by the coordinated movement of the security convoy. The crowds grew thicker as they moved closer to Westminster Abbey, with people of all ages gathered to witness this historic moment. Many held small flags while others simply stood in respectful silence, understanding that they were part of something that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The diversity of the crowd reflected the broad appeal that the royal family, and particularly William and Catherine with their young children, had maintained with the British public. Inside the car, conversation was minimal as each family member processed the magnitude of what lay ahead. William occasionally glanced at his watch, mentally reviewing the precise timing that would govern every aspect of their arrival and the ceremony that would follow. Catherine kept a watchful eye on the children, ready to offer reassurance or gentle reminders about the behavior that would be expected once they reached their destination. The ancient spires of Westminster Abbey came into view as their convoy navigated the final streets of their journey. The sight of the Gothic towers rising above the London skyline created a moment of profound reflection for William, who understood that he was following in the footsteps of countless generations of his family who had entered those same sacred doors for moments that had defined the monarchy throughout the centuries. The security presence around Westminster Abbey was extensive yet discreet, with officers positioned at every possible vantage point to ensure the safety of the royal family and the thousands of people who had gathered to witness their arrival. The coordination required to manage such an event while maintaining the dignity and reverence appropriate to the setting represented months of careful planning by teams of dedicated professionals. As their car approached the final approach to Westminster Abbey, the noise from the crowds grew more intense, yet it remained respectful and celebratory rather than overwhelming. The people gathered understood that they were witnessing history in the making, and their behavior reflected the solemnity of the occasion, mixed with genuine affection for the family they had come to see. The moment when Westminster Abbey came fully into view through the car window, marked the end of their journey from the private world of their residence to the very public arena, where they would soon play their part in a ceremony that would be remembered as a defining moment in the modern history of the British royal family. The official car came to a gentle stop directly in front of Westminster Abbey's great west door, where centuries of royal history had unfolded before this very entrance. The driver maintained his position as protocol officers moved swiftly, but quietly into place, their practiced movements ensuring that every detail of the arrival would proceed with the precision that such moments demanded. The ancient stones of the Abbey seemed to watch in silent witness as another chapter in the long story of the British monarchy was about to begin. William took a deep breath as he prepared to step out of the vehicle, knowing that the moment his foot touched the ground outside Westminster Abbey, he and his family would become the center of attention for millions of people watching around the world. The weight of history pressed down upon him as he considered that he was about to walk through the same doors that had welcomed kings and queens for nearly 1,000 years, each carrying their own hopes and responsibilities into the sacred space. Beyond, the car door opened with ceremonial precision, and William emerged into the crisp London air that carried with it the sounds of the waiting crowd and the distant chiming of church bells across the city. His first steps onto the ancient cobblestones outside the Abbey were measured and deliberate, understanding that photographers would capture this moment from every possible angle. The formal attire he wore seemed to take on added significance. In the shadow of the Gothic architecture that towered above him, Catherine followed, her husband out of the vehicle with the graceful composure that had become her trademark at such events. Her feet touched the ground outside Westminster Abbey with the knowledge that she was stepping into a role that countless royal women before her had fulfilled, yet each time under circumstances unique to their particular moment in history. The morning light illuminated her carefully chosen outfit as she stood beside William, presenting the image of partnership and shared purpose that had become central to their public representation. Prince George was the first of the children to emerge, his young face showing a mixture of excitement and the serious concentration that came with understanding the importance of the moment. His smaller steps across the cobblestones were careful and measured, guided by the gentle coaching his parents had provided in the weeks leading up to this day. The formal clothes he wore made him appear older than his years, yet as youthful. Curiosity remained evident as he took in the magnificent sight of Westminster Abbey rising before him. Princess Charlotte stepped out of the car with natural confidence, her bright smile already in place as she caught sight of the crowds gathered beyond the security barriers. Her dress moved gracefully in the slight breeze as she took her place beside her brother, showing none of the nervousness that might be expected from someone her age, facing such an overwhelming public moment. The poise she displayed suggested an intuitive understanding of her role and the expectations that came with it. Prince Louis required more assistance as he emerged from the vehicle, his mother's gentle hand guiding him as his feet found their footing on the uneven cobblestones outside the Abbey. His younger age made the grandeur of the surroundings more overwhelming, and he stayed close to his parents as he tried to process the magnitude of what was happening around him. The formal outfit he wore had been carefully selected to be both appropriate for the occasion and comfortable enough for a child his age. To manage throughout the long ceremony ahead, the family stood together for a moment outside Westminster Abbey, creating an image that would be remembered and studied for generations to come. The ancient Gothic facade of the Abbey provided a dramatic backdrop as they prepared to enter the sacred space where so much royal history had been made. The contrast between the timeless architecture and the modern family standing before it seemed to represent the ongoing evolution of the monarchy itself. The sound of the Abbey's bells grew louder as they prepared to enter, their ancient bronze voices carrying news of this historic moment across London and beyond. Each bell had witnessed countless royal ceremonies over the centuries, And now they were adding their voices to announce another significant chapter in the long story of the British crown. The resonance of their chimes seemed to connect this moment to all the ceremonies that had come before. William took Catherine's hand briefly as they prepared to walk toward the great west door, a gesture of mutual support that spoke volumes about their partnership in facing the unique challenges of royal life. The children moved closer to their parents, understanding instinctively that they were about to cross from the familiar world outside into something far more formal and significant than anything they had experienced before. The massive wooden doors of Westminster Abbey stood open before them, revealing glimpses of the soaring arches and ancient stonework that lay beyond. The threshold they were about to cross had been crossed by kings and queens, prime ministers and presidents, and countless other figures who had shaped the course of British and world history. Now it awaited this young family who represented both the continuation of ancient traditions and the promise of renewal for the monarchy. As they began their walk toward the entrance, the crowds beyond the security barriers fell into respectful silence, understanding that they were witnessing a moment of profound significance. The only sounds were the soft footsteps of the family on the cobblestones, the gentle rustling of Catherine's dress in the breeze, and the continued chiming of the Abbey's bells that seemed to welcome them into the sacred space. The security personnel who surrounded them at discreet distances moved with practiced efficiency, their presence barely noticeable, yet providing the protection necessary for such a high-profile public moment. Years of planning and preparation had gone into ensuring that every aspect of this arrival would proceed smoothly, allowing the family to focus on the ceremony ahead rather than concerns about their safety or security. The Gothic arches of the great west door grew larger as they approached, the intricate stone carvings that decorated the entrance becoming more visible with each step. These decorations had been created by craftsmen centuries ago, yet they seemed to reach across time to welcome this modern royal family into the sacred space beyond. The artistry of those long-ago stone carvers provided a tangible connection to the generations of people who had contributed to making Westminster Abbey one of the most significant religious and historical sites in the world. The final steps before entering Westminster Abbey seemed to slow as the family savored these last moments in the outside world before crossing into the formal ceremony that awaited them. The weight of anticipation was palpable as they prepared to enter the sacred space where they would take their places in a ritual that connected them to nearly 1,000 years of British royal history while also marking their own unique contribution to that continuing story. The moment William's foot crossed the threshold into Westminster Abbey, the outside world seemed to fade away completely. The ancient stones that surrounded them had witnessed nearly 1,000 years of British history, from coronations of medieval kings to state funerals of beloved monarchs. The temperature inside was noticeably cooler than the morning air outside, and the quality of light changed dramatically as the soaring Gothic windows filtered the sunlight into patterns of colored brilliance that danced across the stone floors. Catherine followed her husband into the sacred space, her eyes immediately drawn upward to the magnificent vaulted ceiling that seemed to reach toward heaven itself. The Abbey's interior never failed to inspire awe, but on this particular morning, with the weight of ceremony ahead of them, it felt even more powerful and moving. Her footsteps on the ancient stone floor created soft echoes that seemed to whisper of all the royal women who had walked these same paths before her, each carrying their own hopes and responsibilities into this sacred space. Prince George entered the Abbey with wide eyes that tried to take in everything at once. The sheer scale of the interior was overwhelming for someone his age, with massive stone pillars rising like ancient trees toward the ceiling high above. The stained glass windows threw patterns of blue and red and gold across the floor where he walked, creating a magical carpet of light that seemed to welcome him into this most special of places. His young mind struggled to comprehend that he was walking where kings and queens had walked for centuries before him. Princess Charlotte stepped into Westminster Abbey with the natural grace that had become her trademark, yet even her confident demeanor showed signs of being impressed by the magnificent surroundings. The Gothic arches that stretched above them created a sense of being inside a stone forest, with each pillar and arch leading the eye upward toward the heavens. Her dress rustled softly against the stone floor as she moved deeper into the abbey, following her parents toward the area where the ceremony would take place. Prince Louis stayed very close to his mother as they entered the abbey, his small hand reaching for hers as the enormity of the space around them became apparent. The echoes of their footsteps seemed to bounce off every surface, creating a symphony of sound that spoke of the countless ceremonies that had taken place within these walls. His young eyes darted from the towering pillars to the intricate stone carvings that decorated every surface, trying to process the incredible artistry that surrounded them on all sides. The procession toward the altar area moved slowly and deliberately, allowing the family time to adjust to their surroundings and prepare mentally for the ceremony ahead. William found himself remembering his own first visits to Westminster Abbey as a child, when the scale and grandeur had seemed even more overwhelming than it did now. The knowledge that he was now bringing his own children into this sacred space for such a significant moment created a profound sense of the continuity of royal tradition across the generations. The distinguished guests who had arrived earlier were already seated in the carefully arranged sections of the abbey, their presence adding to the weight and significance of the occasion. These were people who understood the importance of what was taking place, from senior members of the government to representatives of the Church of England, who would play key roles in the ceremony itself. Their quiet conversations ceased as the royal family made their entrance, all attention turning toward William, Catherine, and their 3 children. The altar area of Westminster Abbey, where so many pivotal moments in British royal history had taken place, came into view as they continued their processional walk. The space had been prepared with meticulous attention to detail, from the positioning of the ceremonial items that would be used during the service to the arrangement of flowers that added color and life to the ancient stone surroundings. Every element had been chosen to honor both the traditions of the past and the significance of this particular moment. Catherine kept a watchful eye on the children as they moved through the abbey, ready to offer gentle guidance or reassurance if any of them seemed overwhelmed by the grandeur surrounding them. The acoustics of the space meant that even the smallest sounds were amplified, so she used quiet gestures and encouraging smiles to communicate with them, rather than words that might echo through the sacred space and disturb the reverent atmosphere. Lighting inside Westminster Abbey created an otherworldly atmosphere that seemed to transport everyone present back through the centuries to connect with all the royal ceremonies that had taken place within these walls. The ancient windows, some dating back hundreds of years, cast patterns of colored light that shifted and changed as clouds moved across the sun outside. This interplay of light and shadow added a sense of divine presence to the proceedings, reminding everyone present that they were participating in something far greater than themselves. Prince George found himself fascinated by the intricate stone carvings that decorated the pillars and arches around them. These masterpieces of medieval craftsmanship told stories in stone, depicting everything from biblical scenes to the heraldic symbols of long-deceased monarchs. His young mind tried to imagine the skilled craftsmen who had created these works of art so many centuries ago, their legacy living on to witness this modern chapter in the continuing story of the British monarchy. The organ music that began to play as they took their designated positions filled the abbey with sounds that seemed to emerge from the very stones themselves. The massive pipe organ, with its centuries of history accompanying royal ceremonies, added its voice to welcome this family into their roles in the day's proceedings. The music chosen for the occasion balanced traditional hymns that had been sung at royal ceremonies for generations with more contemporary pieces that reflected the modern nature of this particular royal family. As they reached their positions for the ceremony, each family member took a moment to absorb the full impact of their surroundings. The coronation chair, which had been used for the crowning of English and British monarchs for over 700 years, stood nearby as a tangible reminder of the unbroken chain of royal succession that they were now part of. The sight of this ancient throne, worn smooth by centuries of use, created a powerful connection between past, present, and future. The assembled congregation, representing the best of British society and international dignitaries who had come to witness this historic moment, created an atmosphere of respectful anticipation. Their presence transformed Westminster Abbey from a magnificent but empty space into a living community gathered to participate in a ceremony that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The quiet rustling of formal attire and the soft murmur of respectful conversation added human warmth to the ancient grandeur of the setting. The moment had arrived for the ceremony to begin in earnest, with William, Catherine, and their children now positioned within the sacred space where British kings and queens had marked the most important moments of their reigns for nearly a millennium. The weight of history seemed to press down upon them from the soaring arches above, while the expectant faces of the congregation reminded them that this moment belonged not just to them, but to the entire nation they served. The silence that filled Westminster Abbey was profound and complete as the Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forward to begin the ceremony that would mark this historic moment in British royal history. His robes, rich with the symbols of his office, seemed to glow in the filtered light that streamed through the ancient stained glass windows. The weight of the moment was visible in his dignified bearing as he prepared to speak the words that would formally begin proceedings that connected this day to centuries of royal tradition. William stood with perfect posture, his hands clasped behind his back in the formal stance that years of royal training had made second nature. The expression on his face showed the deep seriousness with which he approached this moment, understanding that the words he would soon speak and the commitments he would make would resonate far beyond the walls of Westminster Abbey. His eyes occasionally moved to Catherine and the children, drawing strength from their presence as he prepared to take his place in the long line of royal history. Catherine maintained her position with elegant composure, her attention divided between the ceremony unfolding before them and the needs of their three children who were experiencing something entirely outside their normal childhood experiences. The formal nature of the proceedings required a level of stillness and attention that challenged even well-behaved children, but she had prepared them carefully for this moment. Her gentle presence provided the anchor they needed to remain composed. Throughout the lengthy ceremony, Prince George stood with remarkable maturity for his age, his young face showing the concentration that came with understanding that this was no ordinary family outing. The formal clothes he wore seemed to help him adopt the serious demeanor appropriate for the occasion, and his parents could see evidence of the careful preparation they had provided in the weeks leading up to this day. His eyes moved between the Archbishop and his father, beginning to understand that he was witnessing something that would shape his own future in ways he could not yet fully comprehend. Princess Charlotte remained still and attentive throughout the opening portions of the ceremony, her natural poise serving her well in this most formal of settings. The dress she wore for the occasion had been chosen to reflect both her youth and her position within the royal family, and she carried herself with the confidence that had already made her a favorite with the British public. Her occasional glances toward her parents showed that she was following their guidance, while also developing her own sense of how to behave in such circumstances. Prince Louis, despite his young age, managed to remain remarkably composed as the ceremony progressed around him. His parents had worked carefully to prepare him for the length and formality of the proceedings, and their efforts were evident in his behavior. When he occasionally shifted or looked around the magnificent abbey, Catherine was ready with subtle gestures to redirect his attention back to the ceremony. His presence alongside his siblings created a powerful image of the royal family united. Across generations, the archbishop began to speak the ancient words that had been used in royal ceremonies. For centuries, his voice carrying clearly through the abbey and reaching every person in attendance. The language was formal and traditional, connecting this modern ceremony to the long history of the British monarchy while also acknowledging the unique circumstances of this particular moment. The weight of tradition was evident in every syllable, yet the words felt fresh and meaningful as they were spoken in the presence of this young family. As the ceremony progressed, the responses that William was required to make were delivered with clear conviction and obvious sincerity. His voice carried well through the abbey, reaching not only those in attendance, but also the millions who were watching around the world through television coverage. The words he spoke were not merely ceremonial, but represented genuine commitments that would guide his actions in the years to come. Each response was delivered with the knowledge that it would be remembered and analyzed for generations. The children watched with growing fascination as the various elements of the ceremony unfolded before them. The combination of ancient ritual, magnificent setting, and their father's central role in the proceedings created an experience unlike anything they had encountered before. Their parents could see them processing what they were witnessing, beginning to understand their own place within the complex structure of royal tradition and responsibility. The moment came for the exchange of symbolic items that represented the transfer of certain responsibilities and privileges within the royal family. These objects, some of them centuries old, carried with them the weight of history and the hopes of the future. As William received each item, the significance of the moment was reflected in his careful handling and the reverent attention he paid to the words that accompanied each presentation. Catherine watched her husband with pride and love as he participated in the ceremony that would mark a new chapter in their family's service to the nation. The formal setting and ancient traditions could not diminish the personal significance of the moment for her, as she witnessed the man she had married take on responsibilities that would affect their entire family for years to come. Her presence provided him with the support and encouragement that had become central to their partnership in royal life. The music that filled Westminster Abbey during the ceremony was provided by the world-famous choir whose voices had graced royal occasions for generations. Their performance of traditional hymns and specially chosen pieces created an atmosphere of reverence and celebration that perfectly matched the significance of the moment. The ancient stones of the abbey seemed to resonate with the music, creating an acoustic experience that transported everyone present into a realm where earthly concerns gave way to higher purposes. As the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, the emotional impact of what had taken place began to register fully with everyone in attendance. The combination of ancient setting, traditional ceremony, and the presence of this modern royal family created a moment that would be remembered as a defining point in the contemporary history of the British monarchy. The children, who had behaved with remarkable composure throughout the lengthy proceedings, began to show signs of the pride they felt in their father and their family. The final words of the ceremony were spoken with particular gravity, as everyone present understood that they had witnessed something truly historic. The Archbishop's closing benediction seemed to seal the significance of what had taken place, while also offering hopes and prayers for the future that lay ahead for this family and the nation they served. The silence that followed was filled with emotion and respect for the traditions that had been honored and the commitments that had been made. As the ceremony concluded and the family prepared to leave Westminster Abbey, the sense of transformation was palpable. They had entered as a family carrying the weight of royal tradition and responsibility, and they would leave with those responsibilities formally acknowledged and blessed within one of the most sacred spaces in British history. The journey back through the Abbey and out into the world beyond would mark their return to public life with renewed purpose and commitment. The final image that would remain in the memories of all who witnessed this historic day was of William, Catherine, and their 3 children standing together in Westminster Abbey, united in their commitment to serve while also representing the hope and promise of the future. The ancient stones that had witnessed so much history had added another chapter to their story, one that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come.